Hundreds of videos not released, early access. Join the Patreon. MythVision. Here are some of our donor questions. We'll start with them, and first we'll just call him Anonymous. Anonymous does not want his name to be mentioned, but he asks, can you briefly talk about the parallels, if any, between Jesus and a contemporary Greek miracle worker, Apollonius of Tyana? Was there any borrowing between the narratives, and who borrowed from who, if there was?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the background of the question, behind the question, is the fact that we have stories of other people besides Jesus who are portrayed as miracle working sons of God, who often are born because of some miracle, some supernatural event, who are Wunderkind, children who are like religious superstars, and who grow up and then go on itinerant preaching ministries and can heal the sick and cast out demons and raise the dead. And at the end of their life, they ascend to heaven. So, sounds like Jesus. So one of the better known people in recent times has been this figure, Apollonius of Tyana. Apollonius was not a contemporary of Jesus. He lived at the end of the first century instead of the beginning of the first century. But he also had a miraculous birth where a god made a woman pregnant and he was born, who was a religious genius as a child, who, when he grew up, went on a preaching ministry, teaching people that they shouldn't be concerned about the material things of life. They should be concerned about the spiritual realm, who could heal the sick and make the weather do what they wanted it to do, and so on, and raise the dead. And at the end of his life, he was brought up on charges before the Roman authorities, and he ascended to heaven, where he still is. And so that's Apollonius of Tyana. Now, when you tell it in those general terms, it sounds just like Jesus. If you actually read the stories, it's not just like Jesus. It's very different from Jesus in a lot of ways, lots of ways. For one thing, this guy is a Neo-Pythagorean philosopher. He's not a Jew. Right. And so there are lots of differences. And the mother's actually not a virgin. It's just God gets her pregnant, but she's not a virgin. So there are lots of differences, but there are lots of similarities. And so the question is, why do you have these stories? And it's, as I said, it's not just Apollonius and Jesus. I mean, you have people like this. And so I think the reason is because in the ancient world, if you're talking about somebody that you think is a superhuman, like he's human, but he's not like the rest of us. Right. There are certain kinds of stories you tell about someone like that. And these are the kinds of stories about their miraculous birth, their miraculous life, their miraculous afterlife. And so these are the things you say. And one of the things you say is that this person has become a divine being. And in the ancient world, the way you become a divine being is by going up to live in the divine realm. And so you have these stories of ascensions up to heaven. It's tricky because Apollonius lived after Jesus, but the accounts we have were written after the Gospels. So like you might think, you're not sure who's borrowing from whom here. So it doesn't look like the Gospels are borrowing from Apollonius. But I'm not sure that the biographer of Apollonius is borrowing from him either. I think these are just stories that you find in the ancient world. And these two people are two of them.
So technically it was in the milieu, so to speak, in the air. There was a common practice for things like this. Awesome. Next question, same donor. He asked if you could briefly speak about the writings of Lucian of Samosata. And what I like about him is he's a second Socratic. So this is a guy who, I guess we'd love him today, especially with the religious freedom we have. But he's arguing and writing funny, humorous stuff about superstitious people. And can you comment on that and just give us elaborate on how this character was in the ancient world and how he affected Christians?
So Lucian of Samosata was he's a skeptic and he's a satirist. So he writes satires. So if you've ever read Voltaire, like the French satirist Candide, who makes fun of religion by having religious people do stupid things. Lucian of Samosata does that. And not just with religion, but also with philosophy. So we have a lot of his works, and some of them are very amusing, and they poke fun at people, including religious figures, including one figure who his name is Peregrinus. This figure is Peregrinus, and he is a cynic philosopher who claims that nothing in this life really matters. The material world doesn't matter. Pleasure doesn't matter. The point is to escape this world and not to be bound by material wealth or material pleasure or anything. And he proves that he's really committed to his message by committing suicide, by throwing himself on a pyre built for the purpose at one of the Olympic Games in the 2nd century. And Lucian observes this whole thing and thinks the guy's a real shyster, even though he's killed himself to do this. But it turns out in Lucian's account of him, he became a Christian for a while. And he duped the Christians into thinking that he was like the second Jesus or something. And so you get that. And then you get other people who are shysters who do magic tricks that are sleights of hand and convince people that they're miracle workers and so on. So Lucian's making fun of all that because he's skeptical about everything like that. He's a terrific source for understanding early Christianity and for understanding some of the New Testament. But he's also just really fun to read. So people who are interested in this kind of thing, Lucian of Samosata, great reading.
Thank you, Dr. Ehrman.